everybody, it's Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here, and once again it is time for the Gear Talk Q&A. And I was really impressed this week. You guys asked me so many questions that I kind of had to pick and choose this time, and I've actually had weeks where I didn't get enough good questions to even do a video. So I tried to pick what I thought were some of the more interesting questions. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. And let's get right to these questions. First question, is Synthol used a lot in bodybuilding? If so, by who and where? I went with this one because I've just always assumed that this is common knowledge outside of the hardcore bodybuilding circles, that most people were aware of this, but I've noticed in starting my channel, this doesn't seem to be general knowledge. But yeah, Synthol is not only widely used in bodybuilding, it is pretty much the norm, not the exception, in the upper ranks of the sport. And what I mean there is, when you look at the Olympia lineup, pretty much the top 10 are using Synthol. And if they're not using Synthol, they're using some sort of other site enhancement, such as injecting huge amounts of anabolic steroids directly into muscles for site enhancement. And it's not to say that it causes more growth, but it builds up scar tissue and it causes swelling, which makes the muscle bigger. And it's because the standards that we have today for certain muscles in pro bodybuilding, things like biceps, triceps, delts, have been set by people using site enhancement of various types. Now, if you guys don't know what the Synthol is, let me explain what that is. It's a medium chain triglyceride oil that has been mixed with lidocaine and with some sort of alcohol to sterilize it. The lidocaine numbs it a bit, and people inject that directly into a muscle to swell it up, and the MCT oil gets encapsulated, and it's harder for your body to break it down, so it stays longer than other ones. And I've seen cases of guys, like a perfect example was Flex Wheeler, used so much Synthol that it just was overwhelmingly obvious that he probably had 4 inches of Synthol on his arms. So if he had 20-inch arms, he probably only had 16-inch arms when he was going on stage at the Mr. Olympia, but he had enough Synthol in there to add a good 4 inches. And it became really obvious when he got sick and he had to quit training and he shrunk down, and you could still see all that Synthol in his arms that had built up, and it was going to take it years to dissipate. And so it can take it a long time to break up and dissipate. And that's a perfect example, is you use the Flex Wheeler example to see just how much he had in his arms when he shrunk down, because it was just huge pockets of it still in there. But yeah, it's the norm, and again, if they're not using Synthol, they're directly site injecting large volumes of steroids. In fact, Greg Valentino, who we always consider to be a poster boy for Synthol, actually claimed at one time that it was not Synthol that he injected in there, but he was using huge amounts of equipoise, something like up to 2 grams a week of equipoise for years on end, and site injecting all of it directly into his biceps, triceps, and delts. And that's what gave him that look. And I don't completely unbelieve him. It's very well possible. But yeah, Synthol is very much the norm these days. And it has been for a long time in the upper ranks of the sport. And is it silly? Yeah, I think it's a bit silly, but so are breast implants. There's not really much of a difference there. All right, next question. What's the least amount of test a big guy could maintain his eyes on? Say he was content with size, but wants to make sure he has HDL to LDL ratios, liver enzyme values, red blood count, all in check for long-term health. I'm normally going to say that for a really big guy, somewhere between 250 and 500 milligrams of testosterone for your cruises is going to give you this. And now I'm not going to name any names, but I know from personal interaction that a very prominent person on YouTube, and no, I'm not going to answer questions who the names are. If you guys can't figure it out, then I'm not even going to bother to tell you, who is huge and a lot of people would consider to be a heavy abuser, actually spends about half of his year on 250 milligrams of testosterone. So he is able to maintain his size through most of the year on that, and only uses more than that when he needs to put on size or to prep for a contest. So I would say a lot of very big guys can maintain everything on 250 milligrams in between their blasts. And at 250, you can definitely get all of those markers in check. You literally might only need something like a little bit of Nolvadex to boost your HDL, and you might want to donate blood and keep up with your red blood cell count, but your liver value should stay normal, your LDL should be pretty good. As long as you're not eating a high salt diet and things, your blood pressure should be in check. So you can maintain that sort of dose while maintaining your health. And you can get pretty damn big and still hold on to your size on that. Alright, next question. Your thoughts on Deca. How to minimize chances of it occurring. Well, you need to keep in mind that not everyone gets Deca. And those who do, it's generally caused by some sort of buildup of progesterone or prolactin. And in my experience, even people who are prone to Deca can still run large amounts of nandrolone and get rid of it. And for those who don't know what Deca means, that is impotence caused by using nandrolone, which is a very well-known and very, very effective anabolic steroid, but it can cross-bind to progestin receptors, so it can do some weird things in the body. But what I have found in my experience, that the majority of guys who get it, a simple TRT dose of testosterone added to your mix, and I'm talking 100 or 200 milligrams at the most. You can run as little as 100 milligrams a week, which is a normal TRT dose, and a little bit of Cabergon, as little as half a milligram once a week, which is an antiprolactin. And it also is an ED treating drug, which is actually what it's used for medically, to treat erectile dysfunction. And that will actually sometimes even reduce the amount of bloat that you have on nandrolone. So it can reduce the water retention also. But that combination, for the majority of guys who get it, in my experience, completely removes it. And they don't have problems anymore. And the only people who are worried about the cost of the Cabergon is because they're using too much of it. You should be able to get a month's worth. It's just going to be 4 pills, half milligram pills, relatively cheap. It's not that expensive. It only seems expensive if you're thinking you have to take one every day. Alright, next question. What percentage of professional boxers are on performance enhancers, and is EPO one of the major ones? As far as professional boxers, I'm going to have to say somewhere between 99 and 100% are going to have to be, because it's a competitive sport with a lot of money involved. And you don't go pro in a sport like that without drugs. And even in lower paying sports, you don't do well as a pro clean. You might go pro, but you're not necessarily going to make any money, or you're not going to do very well. But in boxing, yeah. Now, as far as what they use just the same normal stuff most other strength or endurance athletes use. They just have to get around their drug testing. They're going to use, depending on what their drug testing schedule is going to be like, usually short chain testosterones, test suspension, orals like Anadrol, T-Bol. They've got to watch some things like Anavar because you don't want to get cramps, but if they can get away with it, they'll use things like Anavar. They're usually going to use a little bit of growth hormone. Now, EPO can be used by them, but usually the amount of extra red blood cells that a boxer needs to be on top of his game, because it is a conditioning sport, but it's not a true endurance sport in every sense of the word, of the type that necessarily needs EPO. But usually just a lot of conditioning work when they're on a bit of testosterone and other anabolics will usually push their red blood cell count up high enough for them to have the stamina they need to make it to the last round. But a few of them still use EPO, but it isn't absolutely necessary for them because they have other tools that can replicate part of the job of it. And you don't need the full benefits of EPO for the amount of endurance that you need for boxing, even though it is very much a conditioning-oriented sport. Alright, last question. Hey Jason, what is your take on oxymethylone, aka Anadrol? The good, the bad, the ugly is many tend to stay away from it, whereas on the other hand, many tend to swear by it. Alright, I'm just going to be upfront. This is a very powerful, very effective compound. It's pretty high side effect and it's not for everybody, but in everything from strength and power sports to top level bodybuilding, Anadrol is a heavily used compound, and for good reason. As far as the good goes, it will put strength and size on you very quickly, particularly when combined with other bulking stacks. In my experience, something like Anadrol combined with testosterone and nandrolone is probably just about as good of a bulking stack as you're going to get. It's going to be wet gains, but you guys have to remember that wet bulking is easier on your joints than these dry and lean bulks are. You tend to gain more overall strength because that extra water weight makes you stronger, gives you better leverages in addition to protecting your joints, and therefore you can get stronger quicker, and if you get stronger quicker, you stimulate more muscle growth. So that is one advantage. The other thing that I see it used for particularly well by power lifters is as a pre-workout. It is very, very effective as a pre-workout. 50 milligrams of Anadrol right before you train, about an hour before you train, can easily put another 10 pounds on your bench press, another 10 to 15 pounds on your squat right there that day versus if you didn't have it. So it's very good for that. It's also used by a lot of bodybuilders right there at the end of their contest prep or right before a photo shoot. And a lot of guys are going, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Why would it do that? Well, because, yeah, it makes you retain a lot of water, but Anadrol for a lot of guys, not necessarily everyone, doesn't always add a lot of subcutaneous water. It adds intramuscular water. So it tends to fill the muscles out better. Particularly guys who get really flat on things like Tren and Masteron combined together, which will get you ripped and shredded, but they can leave you really flat, and a lot of guys do not fill out on Trenbolone. So something like Anadrol is used by them to fill out. Now, the bad and the ugly with it is that it produces huge amounts of water retention. It seems to elevate estrogen levels also, but it does so in a way not through aromatase activity, because Anadrol is not subject to aromatase activity, so an aromatase inhibitor may not stop the water retention or the estrogen at all on it. So that's one of the big concerns right there. So it's very easy for guys in certain stacks to develop gyno on Anadrol even when they're using other things to help. So you're going to have to, if you're prone to that, you're going to have to use an actual anti-estrogen rather than an aromatase inhibitor. A SERM basically. Also, because of the water retention, it can make some guys look fat and bloated, but most guys who are using stuff like that don't really care unless it's contest prep. But blood pressure is a very big concern on it because, again, the water retention. Now, the other thing to be concerned with is that also this is an orally active steroid. It is 17-alpha alkylated, and therefore it can elevate liver enzymes. So that is the other thing that you should be concerned about with it. But as far as the effectiveness of it, yeah, it's very effective for a wide variety of athletes, everyone from bulking to strength athletes to guys using it right up there in contest prep to fill out. So it's very powerful and good at its job, but I would not recommend it for the novice gear user. It's again, it's a more advanced compound. You don't need it early on. Alright guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you next time.